Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Jinson George, Assistant Professor, Department of Psychology. I welcome everyone to this webinar series organized by the Departments of Criminology, Psychology, and Sociology on COVID-19 pandemic, impact and responses. We are amidst of a pandemic which has caused crises in different realms of our lives. As human, we evolve and adapt. This situation is nothing different, wherein we are learning how to adjust with the changing conditions brought out by the pandemic. The pandemic has also led to many researches and discussions, helping the mankind to understand and handle the situation in a better manner. The departments of criminology, psychology, and sociology felt the need of orienting the students and academicians about the effects of COVID in different areas of our lives. In this context, this webinar series is organized to convey a comprehensive analysis of impact and response of COVID-19 outbreak on the socio-psychological and deviances in the society. So I would like to give an outline of the 4-day program that we have. So the program begins today, the webinar series is beginning today with the inauguration and the keynote address by Professor R. Indira, Scholar in Residence, Center for Women's Studies, Bangalore University, and formerly Chairperson, Department of Sociology, University of Mysore. Today, session 1, beginning with a session by Dr. K.G. Gayatri Devi, retired Associate Professor, Sociology Institute for Social and Economic Change, Bangalore. The session is titled as Revisiting Poverty and Social Exclusion in the Wake of COVID-19 Challenges in Sustainable Development. On day 2, that is 4th August, 3 p.m. to 4:30 p.m., there will be a session from Dr. G.B. Aravind, Associate Professor, Department of Forensic Science. So Dr. G.B. Aravind will be focusing on crimes during pandemic period and overview. Day 3, that is 5th of August, 3 o'clock p.m. to 4:30 p.m. A talk by Dr. T.C. Mariam Thomas, Assistant Professor, Department of Psychology, University of Kerala, Thiruvananthapuram, on the topic of gender discourses during pandemic. On the last day, that is 6th August, 3 p.m. to 4:30 p.m., there will be a talk on community health and preventive measures by Dr. Chandan N., Assistant Professor, Department of Community Medicine, JSS Medical College, Mysore. And the valedictory there will be a voluntary section by Dr. Soumya Kumar, Coordinator, PG Department of Sociology, Maharani's Arts College for Women, Mysore. So I again invite all of you to the session today. I request the final year BA students to lead us in the time of prayer so that we seek the blessing of God.
Now being recorded.
darkness, open my heart, let me see beauty that made this heart adore you. Hope of a life spent with you. Here I am to worship, here I am to bow down, here I am to say that you're my God. You're altogether lovely, altogether worthy, altogether wonderful to me. King of all days, oh so highly exalted, glorious in heaven above. Humbly you came to the earth, created, all full of sin, became poor. Here I am to worship, here I am to bow down, here I am to say that you're my God. You're altogether lovely, altogether worthy, altogether wonderful to me. Here I am to worship, here I am to bow down, here I am to say that you're my God. You're altogether lovely, altogether worthy, altogether wonderful to me.
Good afternoon, one and all. This web series is an initiative for sharing ideas and experiences with an aim to generate awareness and insight into the impact and responses of COVID-19 outbreak on the social, psychological, and social deviances in the society. On this occasion, I would like to welcome our Rector, Manager of St. Philomena's College, Dr. Bernard Prakash Panis. I welcome the keynote speaker, Professor R. Indira, who is an in-scholar resident, Center for Women Studies, Bangalore University. She is the formerly chairperson, Department of Sociology, University of Mysore. We are grateful to you to have accepted our invitation and grace us with your presence and wisdom for this webinar, ma'am. Thank you. I'd like to extend a warm welcome to Dr. Alfonso de Souza, the principal of St. Philomena's College, Father Reverend John Paul, campus administrator. In their absence, I would like to welcome Reverend Father Maria Xavier, Vice Rector, Professor Oddbert Pinto, Director of PG Center, Mr. Vidyadhar Sanjay Nair, Vice Principal of St. Philomena's College, Mr. Ronald Prakash Kutina, the IQAC Coordinator. I would like to extend our welcome to the resource person for the day, Dr. K.G. Gayatri Devi, who is a retired Associate Professor, Sociology Institute for Social and Economic Change, Bangalore. Welcome, ma'am. And last but not the least, a warm welcome to all our participants attending the webinar today. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Nandita. Now I would like to request the dignitary to light the lamp Senior Reverend Father John Ball, Dr. Alphonsus D'Souza. Now, may I request Reverend Father John Ball, Campus Administrator, to deliver his inaugural speech.
Good afternoon to all those who are gathered here, offline as well as online. I'm indeed delighted to know that departments of sociology, psychology, and criminology and forensic science organizing interdisciplinary national webinar series on COVID-19 pandemic impacts and resource persons. Respected Principal Alphonse D'Souza and the resource persons and the organizers, Dr. Soumya P., Mr. Ginson George, and Francis Devasagayam. So at the outset, I congratulate for your efforts that you have taken to conduct this online program for the development of the students to know the present situation and to act accordingly and to bring out something from this situation. The COVID-19 pandemic has proven to be more than just a threat to our health. It has become a disruption which profoundly affected every segment of society and significantly altered the well-being of entire stratas and communities across the globe. The pandemic has multiplicated effects related to human suffering, economy, psychological levels, and environmental, social domains, and on every aspect of life, with social deviances being no exception. At this crisis, academic discussion through collective efforts are required to protect people and society. This web series is an initiative to provide a platform for sharing ideas and experiences. In this context, webinar series is organized to convey comprehensive analysis of the impact and response of COVID-19 outbreak on the socio-psychological and social deviances in the society. The knowledge generated through collective discussions, debates, and academic research could be utilized for the betterment of the society. It is good to know, and when we know the actuality, we can bring a solution for the actuality, and we should be present. As we are present to the situation, we should accept the situation, and we should find some solutions to come out of the same. And at this juncture, I wish all the best to the resource persons and those who are conducting and those who are organizing and those who are viewing online and as well as offline. I wish them all the best. May this webinar program bring you some good knowledge and may it affect your life and may it bring change in your life. I wish all the best to all who are on this program.
Now, may I request Dr. Soumya P. to introduce the keynote speaker and invite her to the session.
Good afternoon to one and all. Today, we are glad to have a wonderful scholar, Professor R. Indira amongst us. In spite of her busy schedule, Madam has made her time for being with us to deliver today's keynote address at the National Webinar Series on COVID-19 Pandemic, Impacts and Responses. It is my great privilege to introduce my beloved teacher, Professor R. Indira, currently working as scholar in residence at the Center for Women's Studies, Bangalore University, and formerly professor and chairperson of the Department of Sociology and director of International Center at the University of Mysore. Professor R. Indira has held many positions as Dean of the Faculty of Arts, Honorary Director of the Center for Women's Studies at the University of Mysore, and served as UGC nominee on advisory boards of SAP programs to many universities. She was member of the expert group on research innovations and ranking among higher education institutions constituted to recommend strategies for operationalizing the goals of NEP 2020. Professor R. Indira is presently member of the Board of Governors of the Institute for Social and Economic Change, Bangalore, the Second Court of the Karnataka Central University, Gulbarga, Research Advisory Council of Stella Maris College, Chennai, member of the Advisory Board of the SDM Institute of Management Development. Professor R. Indira has been invited as visiting professor not only to the university within our country, but also to the international universities like universities of Puget Sound, Iowa, Delaware, Princeton, Michigan, Cornell, and Florida International University. She has just completed a visiting professorship assignment at the School of Social Sciences, Ramaiah University of Applied Sciences, Bangalore. Professor R. Indira has coordinated the Society and Education course in EPG Patashala program, and nearly 27 students have obtained their degree under her guidance, PhD degree under her guidance. I am very happy to share that Professor R. Indira was the first to become the president from the South to the Indian Sociological Society, the world's second largest body of professional sociologists, and we are all proud of it. Professor R. Indira is a recipient of Fulbright Postdoctoral Fellowship to work on American Women and Technical Education at Purdue University and Fulbright Visiting Lecturer Fellowship involving teaching assignments at the University of Iowa. She has also received 4 fellowships from Shastri Indo-Canadian Institute and Senior Fellowship from the Indian Council for Social Science Research, New Delhi. And she was one among the 3 famous past Fulbrighters from Karnataka whose names were listed in the virtual consulate that was opened in Bangalore. Madam has authored several books and articles in journals, edited volumes and newspaper both in English and Kannada, and has been a contributor and editor to subject encyclopedias, columns in national Kannada dailies, dictionaries, journals, and theme-based books and translation projects. 2 academic publications, one in Kannada and one in English, have been brought out in her honor. The awards and recognition for her work on social issues are Triveni Award, Sadodati Award, and H.S. Parvati Endowment Award, and Distinguished Alumni Award by the University of Mysore Alumni Association. Professor R. Indira has lectured extensively across the country in academic platforms and has more than 300 invited lectures to her credit. And Madam, it is our immense pleasure today to have such a wise soul amidst us, with whose knowledge and experience I am sure the participants will benefit a lot. Madam, there is no words to express my joy. I deem it as my privilege to have with us today. On behalf of all, I heartfully welcome you, Madam.
Should I start? Shuru madla? Samya? Should I start? Hello?
Ma'am, we are not able to hear you, ma'am.
No, unmute ಆಗಿದೆ ನಂದು. ಕೇಳಿಸ್ತಾ ಅಲ್ವಾ?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Ma'am, we are not able to hear you.
ಎಲ್ರಿಗೂ ಕೇಳಿಸ್ತಾ ಇದೆಯಾ? Is everybody hearing? ನಿಮ್ಗೆ ಕೇಳಿಸ್ತಾ ಇದೆಯಾ ಗಾಯತ್ರಿ?
ನನಗೆ ಕೇಳಿಸ್ತಾ ಇದೆ. I can hear you.
What about others?
Yes, ma'am. Able to listen.
You're able?
Yeah,
Yes, ma'am. It's audible.
The conference hall.
ಶುರು ಮಾಡ್ಲಾ?
Hello, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am. It's audible.
Yeah, shall I start now?
Yes,
Yes,
ma'am,
ma'am.
you can
Yes,
start.
ma'am, you can.
Okay, namaste. Good afternoon to everybody, and thank you for the opportunity to be with you all. I have my colleagues and friends and the fraternity of sociology that is here, and my dear friend and colleague Dr. Gayatri, and all my students and principal of St. Philomena's College, Father Bernard Prakash, and all my seniors and friends. Thank you for the nice introduction, but there is one small little correction. That is that the first president of Indian Sociological Society from the South was Professor M.N. Srinivas himself. And in fact, he was the second president of ISS after Professor G.S. Bhure. And that apart, I have very fond memories of working with St. Philomena's College during the conference of the Indian Sociological Society, which we organized in 2018. And of course, I've come to Philomena's on several occasions, both as a teacher of sociology and also as director of the International Center, because, you know, Philomena's used to have the maximum number of international students until the time I was director. And so I've had a very, very, what shall I say, rewarding, fond relationship with this institution. And I'm glad that we are reconnecting in this context. Now, since there is this national webinar is going to be spread over 4 days and is going to cover different disciplines, I don't have any intentions of making a long speech. I know that I have about half an hour to talk about, but let me try and, you know, make it within 20 or 25 minutes. There's some noise that is coming. Yeah. So all I want to start by saying is that I like the way the topic of today's, you know, this webinar has been worded. It says impact and response. So both are very key factors in handling COVID, because COVID is not just a matter of, you know, loss of lives or a health issue, but it is a question of several crores of people losing their livelihoods and also the need to rebuild lives. Well, in my talk, I would like to talk more about responses than impacts, because my friends here will be looking at different dimensions of the impact that COVID-19 has had. But however, to begin with, I would say that the theme of this webinar is also a reminder to all of us who have gathered here, either online or offline, to think of what we ourselves can give back to society. That is how I look at the word response. And impacts, of course, we have read, we have heard, we have discussed so much about the impact that I really do not know whether I will have anything new to say. However, I just would like to begin by saying that as a student of sociology, I know that the impact of COVID-19, or the impact of any calamity for that matter, COVID, or no COVID, the impact of such disasters, whether they are human induced or, you know, natural, are all differential. It does not have the same impact on groups living in different locations, or on people following different occupations, or on men and women, or on persons, you know, who are in a constant state of marginality, such as, for example, the LGBT LGBTQ+ community, the elderly, the physically disabled. So you can really look at the impact of COVID. You have to look at it. All of us have to look at it. Not as if, it's just one block of ice that came and fell on all of us, but it definitely has shocked all of us. I must admit that all of us, irrespective of where we are staying, what we are doing, how much, what shall I say, how much of resources we have at our command to handle and counter this impact of COVID, all of us have been shocked. All our lives have been disrupted. But to what extent? It cannot be the same on everybody. We, of course, complain. Everybody is complaining. But then, when complaining about the impact of COVID, or while talking about the impact of COVID, I think that we have to first indulge or engage in self-retrospection, or look at ourselves. I do not think I would face the impact of this particular pandemic in the same way as a migrant worker, or somebody who has lost his or her job, or several lakhs and lakhs of families that have lost one or both the parents. People are literally in the streets. According to me, please pardon me if I'm sounding a little, rude and harsh, the only group of people who are not really affected in terms of their lives being dislodged are those in government service. People like us, including myself, I do not think even for a month during the last 1.5 years, our resources got disrupted, at least in terms of the pay we were getting or the pension that we were getting. And also those of us who had the comfort of homes to stay. If we wanted to run away from COVID, if we did not want to face COVID, we at least had a roof under which we could live. But what about millions who did not have any of these, leave alone comforts, but basic necessities? So my first point is that when you talk of the impact of COVID, you will have to look at COVID from a class dimension, from an occupational dimension, from a gender dimension, from the state of health dimension, from a locational dimension, from dimensions of caste, ethnicity. A person who lives, in a what we call a vulnerable state most of the time, the marginalized, the state of marginality, those who have been constantly suffering deprivation, would definitely have experienced the impact of COVID more severely than others. So any analysis of impact has to be space-specific, group-specific, according to me. And then going further, you see, in this society, we talk a lot about equality. Definitely, yes. The world is more equal today than it was at different points of time. There are opportunities that have opened up to more groups that were deprived of these opportunities maybe 100 years ago or even 50 years ago. However, when you talk of opportunity, you have to be very clear in your mind about what do you mean by opportunity. See, we sociologists, we talk of social mobility. The opportunity to go up the ladder. This life is like a hierarchical structure. So some of us have always had opportunities to get over those barriers and keep on climbing to the top. And this is what I would call as those people who are in the comfort zone. Whether in terms of social status, whether in terms of access to physical infrastructure, or healthcare, or education, or opportunities to live a very comfortable life. But for a large number of people, it has not translated itself to what we call equity. We are going on using the word inclusions. Dr. Gayatri will be talking about inclusion, social inclusion. And automatically, it goes without saying that when you talk of inclusion, you will have to make a reference to what is exclusion. So there are a large number of groups in our society that have remained excluded from any kind of opportunities to climb the social ladder. COVID or no COVID, tsunami or no tsunami, pandemic or no pandemic. So the impact of deprivation, as I call it, has been only made more severe because you can divide society into two broad groups of people. Those with choice and those without choice. Always those with choice, the choice to live somewhere, the choice to live in a certain way, the choice to go to a certain school or a college, the choice to continue studies or give it up, the choice to work or not to work, the choice to choose to work for a paltry amount of money, or the choice to make negotiations, as they are called, the choice to acquire skills or not having the choice to acquire those skills which are required for achieving social mobility. They are all different groups that we have in our society. So when we talk of the impact of COVID, we cannot ignore social realities. In fact, there have been estimates coming up from international organizations, from studies that are already being conducted in different places across the world, that people are lapsing back to poverty, people are lapsing back to illiteracy, people are lapsing back to lower classes from middle class. You see, one of the changes that we were able to notice in India itself, due to economic liberalization and the opening up of opportunities for mobility on a global scale, and also the, as I told, the opportunities to make choices, it was obvious that many people had just entered the middle class, and a society's state of economic development is measured by the percentage of people who are spread over upper class, middle class, lower class, as we know. But a recent study said that 30% of the people who had got into the middle class have lapsed back into a state of deprivation because they lost their jobs. And this doesn't apply only to those who were working in jobs that did not fetch a very heavy income. See, we were always talking of the IT, BT people, as we called them, the affluence, which all of a sudden they encountered with. Today, many of them have lost their jobs, or they're getting only half the pay. They're not able to pay EMIs. They're not able to pay house rents. There was a case when people spent money because they did not know how to spend money. They had too much. Today, even those people who belong to that group, who do not have the security of a government job, who do not have what they call permanent employment, as many people have here, are also among people who have lost their, basis. So impact depends upon, as I said, what I'm able to do to handle this sudden economic crisis that has come about. And this has affected, as all of us know, this is nothing new. The informal sector is always at the receiving end because there are no conditions of employment, there are no legal protections for them. So they can be thrown out very easily. And this does not include just non-white collar jobs. Even people in white collar jobs have had to go and stand in the street to receive those food packets or groceries, etc., that were being distributed. So COVID, one impact that it has made is that it has made no distinction between, while attacking those who had money, those who did not have money. It just came and struck. So that is the impact, when people were taken by a surprise. I'm not a medical person, so will not speak about it. But I've been reading for the last 2-3 days that more than the disease per se, or if we can use that word, it is the shock, it is the mental agony that people have gone through, which has killed many of them. So we cannot make any generalizations about the impact of COVID. That is all I want to say. Impacts depend upon class, caste, location, occupation, gender, and the state of one's well-being. Now, moving on to response. I said I would like to speak more about that because about impacts we are all aware of. It has impacted health, it has impacted occupation, it has impacted educational opportunities, it has impacted lives and livelihoods, if we can use those two words. Then coming to response, because I think it is very important now to talk about how we respond. See, generally what happens is when a calamity of this magnitude happens, there is too much expectation from the state, from the system of governance, as we can call it. But is it not our responsibility to ask how much can the state do? Because public health has been affected. COVID, one of the greatest damages done by COVID is that it has thrown up a serious challenge to public health. When, the first wave came and even later the second wave, we heard of people ready to pay money but no hospitals. And also there was a system of privatization that has taken place in this country in the past 20 years in the field of healthcare, that there was a huge drain on people's finances. I was talking of lapsing back to a state of poverty. One of the reasons for that is that what you call as out-of-pocket expenses on healthcare rose very highly. Those who could not bank on public health, state-supported public health system, this was a major impact of COVID, had to seek refuge in private healthcare system. Private healthcare system always, is tagged to a question of affordability. And first time we heard that even if somebody was prepared to spend money, there were no beds, no oxygen in the hospital, no medicine. Because there is a myth, misconception that people with money can buy anything. And COVID's impact, one of the impacts was that it showed that even if there is money, there is no proper health care. It was not large enough to accommodate people. We always in health related studies use the word avoidable deaths and unavoidable deaths. And the state of healthcare in a society is clearly reflected by the number of what we call avoidable deaths. Somebody died not because he or she had to die. It was not one of those incurable health issues at all, but it was because medical treatment was not available or because it was just not sufficient to increase the sudden rise in the number of cases with COVID. So name any sector: health, education, jobs, even minimum requirements of life. All those got affected. Education. India for the last 20 years, 20 plus, more than that, has seen a large, I would even use the word invasion of the health sector by the private players. So the state spent less on two vital services: education and health. But with the closure of schools and people just not being able to pay the fee, etc., that was demanded by many of these private institutions, children stayed back. They withdrew. Lockdown. See, even today there is lockdown as far as school education is concerned. Even today, they are not yet decided when to open the schools. But what about the poor? Girl children especially. I said gender. You have to study the impact of COVID vis-a-vis gender. In fact, even when the COVID pandemic struck last year, one of the comments that came from UN was that even the little amount of gender equality we have been able to achieve will now disappear because more children will be, girl children will be out of school. And because of the big blow to reproductive health care, there will be thousands and thousands of mothers of an inappropriate age group. And there is more violence. See, nobody looked at many people, so maybe not nobody, but very few people looked at the COVID pandemic from the angle of domestic violence. Many people thought working from home for a woman would be very safe because we have always, believed that the home is a very safe place for women and girls. But work from home did not work that way. It increased their drudgery and it subjected them to more violence. That is why they use the word shadow pandemic. Many girls were withdrawn from school. As a result of it, the number of early marriages increased. That is one of the impacts of COVID. Child marriages. Last year when the SSLC exams were held and newspapers talked about the number of girls and boys who appeared for the exam, I honestly was quite happy because the numbers were almost equal. Because generally the experience in society, especially in India and many of the emerging economies, is that as the level of education increases, the number of girl children declines. But if we have girls and boys in almost equal numbers taking grade 10 examination, it means that this is a positive development which we have to be happy about. But now with schools closing down, with many girls being forcibly married at an inappropriate age, their lives are gone. The very opportunity that they had for empowerment, for gaining skills, is taken off. And they are now becoming mothers at a very early age, and with the reproductive healthcare system having collapsed in many countries, not just in our country, there are health issues. And now, even programs like the closure of programs like midday meal scheme, the withdrawal of the cycle scheme, all these have affected the education of girl children. And under the pretext of safeguarding, their girls, in many families, they are just being married off. The Women and Child Development Department and many of those agencies, that are now in charge of controlling, regulating child marriages, are reporting that in the last 1.5 years, the number of complaints has increased. So we can go on talking. That is why I said when we look at the pandemic, it has to be looked at from the perspective of the group about which we are talking. Now, quickly coming to responses. I said I'm more interested in that because as a society, what have we done? Initially, we were all shocked. The only response was to run away from COVID. How can I not die? How can I not contact COVID? That time, there was no talk of vaccine. I'm talking about May, June, July, August of 2020. The only sole motto for us was to run away. Stay home, stay safe. We didn't even ask whether the home was safe for everybody, okay? We glorified people staying together, cooking together, eating together, enjoying together. Honestly, I wasn't, okay, maybe opportunities were there, but it's not to be glorified like that. But as time dawned, as times passed, we realized that staying home and staying safe did not really change our lives greatly. Who stayed at home? Who stayed safe? Did they want to stay at home? Were questions that were not asked. And another impact that COVID did was to break away networks of friendships, networks of relationships. All of us have around us what we call a safety network, which keeps us going. We lost that. So coming to responses, I said we expect too much from the state. And I think the state was shocked. There were, of course, many problems with the way the state agencies handled the issue. But nobody can overlook the enormity of the problem. Some states did better than others. Some states were more prepared as time passed on to handle COVID, to respond to COVID than others. But what about civil society? We are all part of civil society, okay? There is no point in blaming the government. For everything we blame them. NEP, we blame them. For COVID, we blame them. Let's be very honest. How many people in civil society really thought of what response they could give to COVID? I would divide, the response issue into two types of responses. One, response by institutions, and other response by individuals. And among the institutions, I would give the priority to educational institutions in the first place and the corporate business houses in the second place. As educational institutions, as at least all those of us with permanent jobs, or, if we have superannuated, some support by the state, how many of us have thought of people who were affected? How many institutions thought of sharing their infrastructural resource? When it is time for admitting students to school, every school talked of state-of-the-art facilities. But we know very well that 30 to 40, and in the case of girl children, it is said half of them don't have access to those Android and those complex telephones, which are very expensive, required to access online learning. Very easily they said, okay, what is the problem? Shift from offline to online. It is not that easy. Because often there are issues of network, connectivity. Okay, how many schools or colleges opened up their computer rooms to neighborhood children? This is what I call as response. And I think even now it's not too late, because this is the time to start responding. How many of them have opened up their infrastructural facilities to children from the neighborhood who could not afford to get the kind of equipment that was required to access online education? How many of them opened up their space for the vulnerable, women, poor, all those who had physical and mental problems to deal with, to come and learn, to under safety for some time? Yes, it was mandatory that all institutions closed down. But even afterwards, complaints of various other forms, but sharing resources. I think that if there is one thing we have failed to do, at least most people, I will go on record saying this, somebody can challenge me, but there are attempts, I don't say no, but by and large, it has been an unresponsive civil society, barring few groups and individuals. Yes, most people thought of themselves. What was once called new normal has today become normal. You don't want to see anybody, you don't want to talk to anybody, you want to run away, you are hoping that nobody talks to you, nobody stops you, nobody comes anywhere around, because I'm worried about my safety. And what about these corporate houses, business houses? Okay, CSR, that I don't want to talk about that now. Before closing, I would say that and people's representatives, look at the way there is this fight. I don't want to use the word struggle, because for me, struggle has positive connotations. The way they are fighting for power. Is this the time? Are we worried about people who are dying, going without food? We take pleasure in publishing pictures of distributing food packets. Is it enough to pick something here and there and give it off? No follow-up? So the response of civil society is what at least now should come to the fore. Institutions with all the necessary resources must now start sharing if they have not already done it. The challenges are to bring back children who have stopped going to school, if not back to school right now because schools have not opened, to make them learn. One of the shocking things that's happening is children are forgetting everything. They are bored and they have got so used to these online, all the things, wrong things that you can do in an online class. They have picked up. They are bored. They're not interested. So like this, I can go on and on, but I don't want to. All I want to say is, and for us, academic institutions, I think it is time we do micro studies to collect data. It is said that one of the greatest challenges of the COVID times has been to generate data. Data not large scale, not global data, plenty, how many people died, how many people lived. All this we know. I'm not going and repeating statistics because I'm a person who likes to discuss issues. But micro level data now need to be collected at the level of neighborhoods, at the level of streets, at the level of villages, cities, towns, because the response is determined by the type of population that resides in an area. Everybody doesn't perhaps need the support of state or civil society to cope with the challenge. They have enough. They can take care of themselves. But what am I ready to give? I'm sorry, but to say this, but when a newspaper item appeared saying that faculty members of colleges and schools without permanent positions, stood in the queue to get groceries. Everybody has to eat to live. We may say it in 100 different ways. But why the skills? Why did they acquire master's, PhD? Why all those qualifications? If this is the state in which this society is putting them? And what have we got shared? Either with our own, the members of our own fraternity, or with the members of society at large. So before closing, I would say that I'm happy that you used this word response in the theme of this webinar. Response is not something you expect always from outside, but from inside. Soul searching, especially in this group that is in the comfort zone, is required. It doesn't matter how many lives we are going to touch. I don't really care for numbers. Even if for one person who is affected by COVID, if we can make a difference, it is not necessary that that response always has to be in the form of money. Everybody has problems these days, because especially after this pandemic. But resource does not mean only financial resource. You have many things which you can share. And institutions, I think, have a larger responsibility, because they need to give now what are called area-specific, group-specific programs, which then you see the gaps that have been created can perhaps be bridged to some extent. So I do not want to go on and on. Thank you very much for the opportunity. Pardon me if I have overshot my time a little. Sorry, Gayatri. I'm looking forward to listening to you. Thank you very much. And I hope, you see, now again, this new psychology has, I'm not an expert to talk about it, but we have already started getting scared now of maybe, yes, the third wave. So we have even stopped doing many things we were doing. Let's question ourselves. When the flow comes in, in the form of resources, what am I giving back? I don't think the government has to issue circulars to teachers as by saying, take classes. We are there to take classes. Don't have to be reminded of that responsibility every time. So the same network, the same COVID, the same problems are being faced by so many people. But it's definitely true that access is limited. Access is reserved only for those comfortable groups. And so I hope that at least now, because this is the time to respond in whatever small way we can, by sharing our resources, financial if we have, or infrastructural or knowledge resource, which many of us have and can definitely share. Thank you very much. Thanks for this opportunity.
ಮ್ಯೂಟ್ ಆಗಿದೆ ಸೌಮ್ಯ, ಮ್ಯೂಟ್ ಆಗಿದೆ. We can't hear you, Soumya. You are muted.
ಇಲ್ಲ ಅನ್ಮ್ಯೂಟ್ ಆಯ್ತು ಅನ್ಸುತ್ತೆ, ಬಿಕಾಸ್ ಮ್ಯೂಟ್ ತೋರಿಸ್ತಾ ಇಲ್ಲ.
ಹೌದಾ? ಕೇಳ್ತಾ ಇಲ್ವಲ್ಲ?
ಹೌದು,
ಹಾ.
ತುಂಬಾ ಕಡಿಮೆ ಇದೆ ಸೌಮ್ಯ. ಇಟ್ಸ್ ವೆರಿ ಮೈಲ್ಡ್.
ಯಾ.
ಒಂದ್ ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ವಾಲ್ಯೂಮ್ ಜಾಸ್ತಿ ಮಾಡಿ.
ಕೇಳ್ತಾ ಇಲ್ಲ.
Now may I request Dr. Alphonsus D'Souza to deliver the presidential address.
Respected dignitaries and all the participants, a very good evening. At the outset, gratitude to Almighty God for keeping us safe and healthy during this pandemic. The COVID-19 pandemic has led to a dramatic loss of human life and livelihood worldwide. It presents an unprecedented challenge to healthcare, food supply, and labor. Economic and social disruption caused by the pandemic is devastating. Tens of millions of people are at risk of falling into extreme poverty, while the number of undernourished people, currently estimated at nearly 690 million or more. In India, around 1.2 lakh children have lost their primary caregivers due to COVID-19. The pandemic has had significant psychological and social impacts on the population. Research has highlighted the impact on psychological well-being of the most vulnerable groups, including children, college students, and healthcare personnel, who are more likely to develop post-traumatic stress disorder, anxiety, depression, and other symptoms of distress. The social distance and the security measures have affected the healthy interaction among people and the perception of empathy toward others. In this context, webinar series organized by 3 departments of the college to convey comprehensive analysis of the impact and responses of COVID-19 outbreak on the socio-psychological and social deviances in the society. I congratulate Dr. Soumya P. and Ms. Rashmi Vinshya from Sociology Department, Mr. Jinsan George and Ms. Nandita Rao from Psychology Department, and Mr. Francis Devasayam from Criminology Department for organizing 4 interdisciplinary webinar series on COVID-19 pandemic impacts and responses. I wish the whole program a grand success. I thank and congratulate all the resource persons on various topics for accepting our invitation and expressing willingness to share their rich experience in the respective fields. I congratulate and thank today's keynote speaker, Professor R. Indira, an eminent personality with high profile. Madam, your words and thoughts are inspiration to all of us. Thank you, madam. I wish all the participants to have a fruitful time, be safe and socially close. Thank you very much.
And addressing all of us. Now with this, we will begin with the first lecture of the webinar series. Before we start, I would like to introduce today's resource person, and I deem it as my great pleasure to introduce our today's resource person, Dr. K.G. Gayatri Devi, retired Associate Professor of Sociology, Institute for Social and Economic Change, Bangalore, who has joined us today to deliver her lecture in the Interdisciplinary National Webinar Series on COVID-19 Pandemic Impacts and Responses. Madam she is currently a visiting professor in National College, Bangalore, and JSS Training Institute for Competitive Examinations. Dr. Gayatri Devi is a consultant and resource person in Translation Division, Azim Premji University, and actively associated with research and PhD program in Institute for Social and Economic Change, Bangalore. Dr. Gayatri Devi is member to various associations like Gender Advisory Committee, Government of Karnataka, Indian Sociological Society, Indian Association of Women's Studies, and Gram Vikas. She is a key resource person to various capacity building programs and HRD centers, consultant to various organizations, institutes, and universities within and outside Karnataka. Dr. Gayatri Devi has about 35 years of research experience, and she has carried out research projects for ISAC on social structure and transformation in India, Dalit and women issues, child labor, unorganized sector workers, Panchayat Raj institutions in India. She has directed many research work and consultancy projects, not only for the state and central government, but also for the international institutions. She has visited many universities as research officer in abroad and has guided the students across the globe. She has nearly 10 years of teaching experience both in UG and PG. Madam has authored 2 books, co-authored 5 books, written chapters in books, and published nearly 45 research articles. It is our immense pleasure to have such an eminent resourceful person with us today. Madam, we are thankful to you for accepting our invitation and joining us virtually to deliver the lecture on revisiting poverty and social exclusion in the wake of COVID-19, challenges in sustainable development. Madam, we are very eager to hear your expertise knowledge. On behalf of the college, organizing departments, and the participants, I heartfully welcome you, madam.
Thank you, Dr. Swarna. Is my voice audible? I have slight irritation, but am I audible properly?
Yes, ma'am. Yeah, ಕೇಳ್ತಾ ಇದೆ.
ಕೇಳ್ತಾ ಇದೆಯಲ್ವಾ? At the outset, I wish to express my grateful thanks to the organizers and to the rector, the St. Philomena's College, the principal, and all the dignitaries who have assembled in the context of the college itself. And thank you for inviting me. In fact, I was very apprehensive because I normally won't agree to speak on anything unless I have some information which I have seen or I have talked to people. In the absence of what we call as field data, I feel very handicapped to just build some negative castles in the air. But it's not possible. Also, I know that it is very difficult to go and talk to people because the pandemic, as Professor Indira has just mentioned, has not unfortunately ended. It is coming back in new appearances, and therefore whatever I will be speaking, I'm so also fortunate. I was thinking myself that is there any need for my lecture, Dr. Soumya, because Professor Indira in her keynote address has taken in her lap almost everything. It was a very holistic, overarching perspective she has given. And I have sent some PowerPoints there, Professor Indira. I was just basking in that pride that I also have included in the last PPT the issue of micro studies. I have also requested that what we need today is micro studies, getting from the people straight, and small studies, not of a larger sample. And it's very, very useful. And I also have identified their employment and education as the two key factors, if at all we need to have any so-called sustainable development for the future, because we have almost, there is a debris now. Nothing exists today. So if we have to rebuild the society, those two are the lines. So the humble request is to take whatever I would be presenting in the overall light of the keynote address, excellently given. I'm very happy that I could listen to her, and I was wishing that she should go on. She just ended that. It was quite nice. Thank you very much for that. And as you remember, Dr. Soumya, I was also asking for some concept note when you first spoke to me. And today's inaugural words by the, I think by the principal, it was very rewarding. I really could put my thoughts into that framework. He mentioned about the COVID and also why this webinar series is for, with its interdisciplinarity. We have psychology, we have expert from criminology and also from social work background. And with the we are all from a very leading medical institution of Mysore. Two are from there and one from Kerala. So this type of an interdisciplinarity is what is actually needed. Nothing can be one-sided. Those type of watershed compartments, just existing in our own departmental perspectives is, I think it should go. And any webinar, I think it should be on similar lines of involving people from various fields of expertise, so that maybe some viable, feasible, if we call that as a solution, can be really found. I have given some PowerPoints. Will you be sharing them, Dr. Soumya? Dr. Soumya, are you there? Dr. Soumya?
Yes, ma'am. Yes,
My
ma'am.
PowerPoints. Not that I will just go according to them, but let them be there because I can draw some points from there. Are you sharing them? Because I have changed my computer, I don't think I can share with this. The other computer, my camera was gone. I couldn't use the camera there. So this computer, I have to open my mailbox and share. Yes, it's coming. Okay. Go to the next one, please. A little bigger, can you make? The screen can be made a little bigger. Yeah, so I was asking you that what are the expectations from this seminar? And you also told me that there are a large number of students who are participating from the pre-university level to higher levels. I think they will be definitely having some expectations from this seminar. And I think they have to follow whatever will be presented and try to comprehend their thoughts along with these. So I have begun there that the impact of COVID-19, now everywhere there is this topic that COVID has impacted the society. So what? What should be done? I don't see the PowerPoints. Okay, so I have also opened in another computer. Okay, so I was saying that the impact, as also said by the keynote speaker, it is a heterogeneous impact. In other words, it affects different sections of the society, and those people are also affected differently. Like, it is not just an economic impact, or not just a health disaster, or not just that it has affected the family or education and various other social institutions. So we need to attend to every quarter to have an understanding of the impact of COVID as such. And when it affects the society, the word devastating is often used, and therefore, many people have compared that to the worst of the disasters, natural disasters, maybe tsunami, maybe an earthquake, or maybe something else like that. And most of those who are affected are always in any tragedy, as in any tragedy. This is, the most important point according to me. Disasters do occur, and they won't choose, again, as said by Professor Indira. But all said and done, those who will be heavily affected are those people whom we call as, by various such jargons, like weaker sections, vulnerable sections, alienated people of society. They are also called as the marginalized people. They are the socially excluded people, and they are also the most people from the bottom levels of the society, because we in our country, we are known for our social hierarchy, which has placed people at different strata based on caste as well as on class. There are the religious groups whom we have recognized as the minorities, and the poverty of the minority, like for example the Muslims, is, according to not me but Justice Sachar and Justice Ranganatha Mishra, who headed the committees on the welfare of minorities. They have written there that the poverty among Muslims and Christians is equal to, and at times even higher than, the poverty among the scheduled castes and tribes. So the question which is most important in understanding and taking stock of the impact of COVID is, yes, it has affected the people. I will not speak about the people affected and getting, the virus and suffering, and finally the mortality part. That part I will not take up. I'm only taking up the impact on the others in the society, their dependents, their family members, their children. And in general, those who are not even affected, they are thoroughly thrown out of the jobs in one manner, or they are thrown out of the educational institutions, etc., etc. So you keep that as the perspective, and kindly follow my lecture, that the affected people are mainly the weaker sections and the vulnerable sections of society, and how are they affected, and what are their own methods to rebuild their life after this collapse of their livelihoods, what they have, and what have they received, is another issue we have to ponder about. And this brings us to certain key issues, like economic is one, which means earnings and the livelihoods. Socio-cultural is another major section, where I have included the institution of family, and the governance in terms of the political system, caste, religious, and other such systems, which constitute even the civil society, as Professor Indira was mentioning, and the, what we call as unbeaten. It is not going, it's still there. It lingers around, the system of patriarchy. Next slide, please. So what is our society like? Next slide, please, Soumya. What is our society like traditionally? You have to take stock of this. Have we come over the drawbacks of our society, or the negative implications on some people? Whatever is the situation or the issue. For example, we speak of 5-year plans. Most of you were not even born at that time. Subsequently, we had several welfare programs in the name of poverty eradication. Then we have poverty reduction strategies. We have a number of schemes for education, for health, for employment. We have the affirmative action or reservation system, which provides reservation of seats in educational institutions for the deprived sections. It gives the protection by reserving certain employment positions to the same categories of people. including even in promotions. So with all these, a full backlog of reforms in the last 70 years, we have or we would have come to some level of development. But even then, there were people who were, in technical terms, socially excluded. So what is the social exclusion? I have just put some definition there, because if you are circulating these PowerPoints for the benefit of students, it may help them. But in summary, social exclusion simply means there are the mainstream or natural resources which are there out for everyone in the society. Like, for example, water, it's a natural resource. Or air, fresh air. Or the trees, or the plants, or the fruits, or the soil, etc., which are God-given, they say, which are natural commodities. And everyone, every human being, and even the animal world has an right over using and preserving these natural resources. But we have a system where people are even excluded from using these resources. They are not allowed to use some of the resources for their own development. So, it is not that they don't want to use. Please understand, be clear about these 2 points. One is, if you voluntarily do not want to use, that is okay. But when that is of dire need for you, and yet you are not allowed, within quotes, to access those resources, that is called as social exclusion. So exclusion is a dictionary word, but what is important is the prefix social. The social ethos, social stratification, our cultural practices, our traditions, maybe in the name of gender division of labor or gendered issues, or maybe in the name of caste groups and untouchability, or for the Adivasis, or various other segments of society, the facilities are forbidden to be used. Okay, and they use various strategies, mechanisms to keep some people away from these developmental resources. And there we have the women, Dalits, Adivasis, and Muslims, who are the chief components of such socially excluded populations. Next slide, please. So when we say the dimensions of social exclusion, how to fight them? All this I am saying so that we proceed to see how they have been affected as a result of COVID. First is a good production, so that we can fight the social exclusion, productivity, economic development, better resources at the command of people, GDP, so on and so on. And then we have consumption. Consumption is included here because production is not enough, but it should be amenable for everyone to consume. Why do we have the PDS then, public distribution system? Because people cannot even afford to purchase the important food grains from the open market because they are very expensive. So the rationing system has come into existence from many decades in our country, so that, and there are varieties there, yellow card, the green card, Antyodaya. So the public distribution system has many such benefits to the people who are distributed essential commodities, including edible oil, and earlier they used to provide kerosene for the stoves. Now there are the gas cylinders which are introduced. There is a provision of, it has also become what Professor M. N. Srinivas has called as the vote bank. So give some 30 kilos of rice or give some subsidies in that, and then you get the votes from people. So the consumption issue is also equally important. Wealth is another aspect of social exclusion, because accumulating wealth is not possible for everyone. Because to have wealth, you need to have some savings. And to have savings, you have to have some good employment. So wealth is another. And the last two are political and social activities. You are to be allowed to participate in the political system, not only just by putting your vote, casting your vote, but as a person who can assert your opinion. I'm coming close to what we call as the Grama Sabhas in the villages, in the Grama Panchayats of our rural India. In Karnataka alone, there are more than 5,500 Grama Panchayats, and everyone who is above the age of 18 years is entitled to attend a Grama Sabha. which has to be held at least once in every 6 months of time in the village, and they can just raise their hands and say, express their opinion. And there are several such other social activities. So social exclusion means you are excluded from all these activities so that only what serves the interests of those who control you can be achieved. Next slide, please. So what it here is the ability to fight against social exclusion. It's all pre-COVID. I'm just taking that scenario first. To repeat, from independence time till 2020, I can say that India really did quite a lot to see that people who are socially excluded are brought to the mainstream of society. We followed a welfare model in the beginning, and by 1980s, it was realized that mere welfare model will be not helpful to people. It will be creating more political interest groups. So there is need for involving the people in their own welfare, in their own decision making. So the term development replaced the growth model, which was influencing all the 5-year plans earlier to 1980s. And from 80s onwards, we have the development programs. If you take gender issues, earlier it used to be women in development. Subsequently, women came along with the decision makers and became women and development, that they are not away from the development, the planners as such. And then the term gender came and it became GAD, gender and development. So the terms empowerment, to empower the people, empower the weaker sections, empower the socially excluded by giving them some special concessions, creating an atmosphere, social atmosphere, so that they can participate, they can say their choice and get what they want. So, it was quite a radical development in my mind. I feel that by 1990s, we had really achieved quite a lot. And then came the major change in terms of the economic and political system called as the globalization, the structural adjustment policies, and liberalization. Market was opened up, and it is both positive and negative in its implications. It encourages people to be more competitive, more entrepreneurial. They can really sell their products. If they produce better products, better quality, they can sell it even globally. So, what I'm trying to emphasize here is that as and when we achieved some stage, there is in India something which comes as a big, thunder and affects all that which has already been achieved. Okay, so what you have already is not enough to survive in that part of the world. That is pre-1980 world was different. Post-1990s world demanded that people should be empowered much more. And there, what came up much was human resource, people's health and education. Health is very important. If health is there, you can achieve anything. Plus knowledge, if not education. We had the Right to Information Act, Right to Education Act, and then there were several other factors which really were achieved. But alas, 2020 comes this pandemic, and I think it has taken the society back to square one, if it is not an exaggeration. Because in the lives of the socially excluded people, today nothing exists. And schemes are coming in such a way, instructions are coming in such a way as if they are ready to take them. For example, don't come out of the house, or use only cards to, do your banking, etc., etc. So one has to realize that all the jobs, all types of occupations people used to profess, particularly by the women in the unorganized sector, are not those which can be carried out sitting in the house. And as Professor Indira rightly asked, do they have a house first? House which can be really used for such types of activities. Is it possible? Do the students have a room where they can keep the cell phone or a computer and get their education? So, unfortunately, it is something that the people who are asking people to do certain things in order to come up, in order to get their education, are, it appears that they are not even sensitive to the people's realities. It's just lost. So the next one, I think it will, next one please. What are needed for better improvement? Even in the pre-COVID situation, they used to call us compulsory educational attainments and adult life chances. See, from time immemorial, I can say, I have been brought up hearing to that statement that education is a passport for employment. Your educational attainments are very strongly related, and if you don't have that, you are in unemployment state. And across the entire developed world or developing world, this is true. And what has happened is, as unemployment levels decrease, educational attainment of workers, it increases. They say that educational attainment is there, but it has not been resulting always in proper employment potential. So, there are several examples which the pre-COVID situation has already told me in my own field studies. When introducing me, Dr. Somya mentioned about so many topics, child labor or Panchayati Raj. Take child labor, for example. Child labor was quite, predominant in several sectors, like making BDs, or in certain dangerous sectors like making, firecrackers, etc., etc., sericulture, silk reeling. And there came a time, maybe around 2012, that there was a decrease in children who were working. And everyone thought it was because of the program and policies of the government, labor department, which was striving hard to locate child laborers and release them from child labor, put them into some schools and mainstream them in their education. And do you know the reality, what our micro studies told us? In reality, it was the loss of jobs which led to loss of jobs to women. Men started doing the women's jobs, and there was no scope for children to go and work at all because their jobs were also in demand. Adults started taking up the jobs of the children. So, there are several such examples where we were living in some illusion that some change has really happened, but there were undercurrents which led to the situation becoming worse, and it was not at all improving in any way. The next one, you can skip the next one and go to the next, skip that. So that also you can skip because I want to come back there after some time. So I call the present situation now the post-COVID. Forget about the COVID part, but remember the devastation it has done. All our development has it become illusory, and it's just an illusion. And all aspects of social change we have written about, we have published, we have been speaking, and the political leaders are asserting on that. I think those aspects of social change have becoming myths today, because the unfortunate aspect of our society and all the efforts of bringing about changes, certain things were not achieved at all, and one among them is structural change. It was not possible to achieve. For example, land reforms is an excellent program. You must have heard of land reforms, because earlier, when there was no land reform policy, maybe from 1976, our former Chief Minister Devraj has introduced that. He made it a law that people who own the land themselves have to till the land, themselves have to cultivate. And earlier to that, and even now clandestinely, hectares of acres of lands are owned by people who are the elite, or whom in sociology we call as the dominant castes, by virtue of some traditional practices called the Jajmani system, etc. It's Jamindari system, Rayatwari, which the British tried to abolish, etc. etc. You all know that in history. So we have inherited such a system, and though land was obtained from the owners, absentee landlords, and the tenancy was abolished, and it was redistributed to people, it was not done efficiently, that the really needy people, even to this day, are landless. Forget about being landless. Even the landed today are not very happy doing agriculture. All of you would have been informed by the mass media that land is not at all productive enough. And to add to that, we have the environmental casualties. That is why I just skipped that PowerPoint. We can come back to that later. The most important dangerous aspect today is the environment itself. There is nothing which is predictable. And sometimes such environment boosts more breeding of the viruses, including the COVID, because COVID linked to the lungs, linked to our respiratory system, can be heavily dependent, it is heavily dependent on certain environmental factors. So the point I'm trying to make is, with the failing environment, failing rainfall, and failing bore wells, and various other such factors, with no proper market for their agricultural commodities. As you know, tomatoes or jasmine or marigold flowers are thrown on the road. The farmers cannot even invest on the truck to get them to the market because they are not sure of getting a good price to that. So you go on taking one sector after the other. Agriculture is today, there are no takers for that. The very rich, they have other options of economy. They are earning through other means. There is the real estate. Many have converted their lands into house sites or apartments. So there are other ways. Let us not take the elite sections. The middle classes and the lower classes who were dependent on land also as a status issue. Owning some land was a symbol of one's status. But today it is no longer so because it is not productive. So when everyone wants job, that is exactly what in the keynote address Madam was mentioning, that people even who were educated, who were in some perhaps assistant professors' jobs, were in the queue to get the free tolls given by the agencies. So the turmoil is, already we have a backlog of poor people. To them are added new poor who were earlier middle or at least lower middle. They were little better off. They were doing in the service sector. They were hawkers on the street, or by driving a cab, or various other sectors were there. Many promoted by the IT and BT industries as forward and backward linkages. So all those people have also been competing with others who from many decades were poor and they were seeking jobs in certain sectors. So there is such unexpected competition. So I say that poverty and exclusion, social exclusion, they are the ills of any society, no doubt. They are variously defined and researched. And almost all their variants are discovered. Great amount of investment has been done. Some change and development was achieved. And if that is true, then the people should have the ability to fight back the forces which affect their development. Is it happening? I questioned myself. When you have to be under lockdown, is there sufficient ration in your kitchen? Can you really manage to feed the family without going out, without raising any loans? There are several suicide cases, whole family committing suicide. And there are several cases where they have gone into depression. Anyway, there is a lecture tomorrow on the psychological issue. So my question is, COVID has led to people who are already poor, and a few more people have joined the sections of those who are socially excluded, not with patriarchy or caste or other systems, but because today they are not included. They cannot be included in whatever they were earlier living because of the situation which has changed. And then the COVID impact and mortality rate, again, I will not touch upon that because I have to speak a lot on the family there, the institution of family, which was supposed to be giving protection, this and that to the children, to the women, to the others. But today, working and learning within the family is one issue. Another issue, again, is the gender violence. Just don't think that it is not happening. I have come across people who think that it's only some feminists who raise this issue. Unfortunately, it is not so. There is gender violence where it is not only violent, but also, mental torture. And, there are several instances where the women are fed up of staying at home, particularly the men who are not used to staying at home. they are, within quotes, creating much nuisance in not accepting what is going on in the house in its usual way. They try to point out some, fault in whatever is being done. So in other words, the whole family living together, irrespective of their age and generation, I think has thrown away many social norms and mores, which were put by the family makers earlier to keep people under some necessary control, or to keep the socialization process going on, or to keep the daily rhythm of life to go on. All that I think is in abeyance now, because there is so much of face-to-face contact, face-to-face interaction, that the exercise of your own roles and responsibilities, I think they are severely affected. Like that, it extends to other institutions, the peer group, whom the children are missing extremely, the institution of education. It's much said about that. I won't talk more on that aspect. Not just the possession of a phone or a computer, but even how many mothers are really literate and educated to facilitate education of the child at home. Can they switch on the computer, or can they switch on the cell phone? Can they use the internet? And I have my own experience. I sat in an auto recently, before all this, and that fellow first went home with me in the auto and borrowed the phone from his daughter, who was using it for her lessons, because he wanted to put the map, GIS map, and take me to some location. So in the whole house, if there are 5-6 members all needing the phone, I think there is only one cell phone. So let us not be very imaginative that, oh, today people earn a lot and the wage rate is so high and people are having savings, government is giving so many through programs, free subsidies, etc. So they ought to have. No, it's not so. It may be so, but as usually in a slang manner they say, those who have received the benefit again and again, they become the beneficiaries, because they are aware of the program, they know the route, and they get that. There are people who have got houses, government houses, for every member of their household. Ambedkar scheme, Ashraya scheme, this and that. And the monitoring is totally lacking there. So on the one hand, the government programs are thoroughly being implemented, and on the other hand, there is nobody to check on the beneficiary's background. It goes to the same family many times. Therefore, the question is, social exclusion and poverty are not solved. They were not solved, and today they have become much more grave and affecting the people in various ways. So the critical concerns, which are all interlinked here, and I have mentioned about the 2 other points. I will not take them up now. Next one, please. So what is very important is, we need to know. In fact, if anybody calls me to speak on the impact of COVID, I feel very apprehensive, because I don't have data with me. What can I speak? What I see through the window of my house? In the early mornings, I hear a little boy, 6-7-year-old, selling flowers. Perhaps he would have been in the school. I think the mother would have asked him to go sell some flowers and then come back and sit and study. I don't know whether that house has even a cell phone or any such gadget to get that boy educated. And for me to go and help out, yes, I am selfish, my own health. See, look at the precarious situation that we are in, and we do not know much about the impact. It is not just the hospital impact, not just the mortality, but for the people who are surviving. And when the television and other media say that now the infection rate has come down, it is 1% or 2%, lockdown is lifted, people can go out, they make a mockery of certain things. In fact, I really feel very bad about that. For example, some months back, it was Ramzan, and people have to shop only in the evenings. Once after the sunset, they have to come out, do their namaz, and then purchase the necessities, go cook, eat, sleep, and again get up, eat. All this should be done before the sunrise again. Why are we not sensitive to people's cultures? In a country which is say secular, sometimes the media also does this type of a very, very wrong type of saying, look at that person, he is doing this, or look at this fellow, how he is running, etc. The issue is here, people's awareness about the problems. If you don't at least influence them positively, at least don't instigate them for negative things. That I think is very much needed now. And how the people are really living today. We need to know that first, and the plea to all the students who have assembled here is, maybe in your project work, or maybe wherever the chance you get, there may be various levels of students who have joined here, some 86 or now it is 55 of them. Wherever it is possible, you have to get information about how are the people surviving today, in what other ways they are being socially excluded. There must be some responsible thinking and action about the welfare of others, and how our own action affects that. Just yesterday, one very well-known professor of sociology, Deepankar Gupta from Delhi, he has written a column in Times of India. He sort of mentioned a similar thought, that why are we not having any community consciousness? Like in our garbage disposal, or wearing our masks, or in our hygienic practices, people are very lackadaisical. They just don't bother. They say that, oh, there is no COVID, or they just hang their mask somewhere as if they have to prove that they are wearing one. So this is not just in India, it may be even outside. I'm not cornering only India here. The question is the community or collective consciousness, which many sociologists spoke as bringing societies from the worst to some better situation. It happened in history. How and why it is not happening now? How can we bring that? How can we feel the need for others' improvement? If at all religion is doing that, or if at all we are very religious, whether Christianity or Islam or Hinduism or any other religion, everyone has said love thy neighbor. Everyone has said don't harm the other person. So when that is the situation, why that is not happening is really a mystery to us. And what is important is to think of some systemic changes. There must be more and more, I don't know what to say here, think tanks, or some options which are suitable for every small group of the society, in terms of how to build the education of the children today. That is the greatest challenge. Professor Andrew Bethe and others, once they declared, I will only write on the middle classes in India today, once he declared. That is because they started seeing the social mobility part more interesting among the middle classes. Note the word, they didn't even say middle castes, middle classes of India. And there was a time, some decades back, caste system was overarching every research, every writing in sociology. So the interest in middle classes came because of several factors. At least in the case of Karnataka, CET was introduced. Many communities which had not even dreamt of their children going to engineering or medical courses, they were able to send them. And those students even went abroad, and their whole family status changed, etc., etc. So when that was the situation, now suddenly, there are no exams, there is no proper coaching. As a teacher myself, I know that the students are, there is a great deal of difference. I find hard to get the right words to express myself. Offline teaching is something different from online. At least for our type of syllabus, our topics there, that interactive mode, plus the economic situation of the student, where every now and then somebody left, it shows, and then again people join. And if I ask, they say there was no data, madam, or we don't have money for this type of long sessions, etc., etc. So teaching methods, testing methods, what is the qualification for jobs, and are those people able to work for those jobs? All that, I think, and whoever is getting appointed for whatever types of jobs, all that has to be, I think, we may have to re-establish the whole society. The tragedy is nothing which existed before can be taken in the same spirit from now on. Entire rewriting of the social fabric of society may have to happen, but we have the political interest groups. There is keen competition to gain a seat in the ministry, and people's associations, including caste associations, which will make a queue whenever there is a backward classes commission or some other commission is appointed. They go and say that we represent this community and please include us in that list or this category. Where are those associations today? And another point which I just noted here, we have started, I know, I wish all the students here at least will be aware of these issues, what are known as local organizations. Local organizations mean in the villages, rural areas particularly, in order to empower the people, several local organizations were given Philip II, like, the self-help groups of women, and if that is a area with no water, watershed development committees, forest committees to develop and protect the forests, mainly by the women as office bearers and workers in those committees. And then we had the drinking water committees, we had the Gram Panchayat with several standing committees, subcommittees. Nothing is working now because of the COVID and lockdown situation. So how will programs be implemented? How are the beneficiaries being selected? Is it all done in the offices of the MLAs and MPs? Because programs are going on, money is being given. So the question is, I think there is a need for changing the tone of the programs also, and more of inclusive policies. It is not enough what we have. More of inclusive policies are needed. So the important issue is in terms of the response to COVID. One very disappointing, hard part of this is, even to this day in our midst, we have some indigenous communities. And please note, I am not blaming them or saying anything categorically against them. It is their cultural system. They are even against any vaccines. They don't allow any medication to get into their Tanda or Hamlet. So how to protect them? Because they have to interact with the broader society for their economy. So they cannot live in isolation like they used to live hundreds of years back. So when some communities are still in their own myths, their own traditions, and hesitating to get the medical treatment or other such aspects, then how do you bring them to the mainstream? Do you agree with them and leave them? Or can you bring them? There was a photo of a man eating a snake, live snake, because somebody told him that poison will kill the virus in his body. So, all these myths and beliefs and other practices, which are part of any society, I agree, but sometimes to get their consent and such type of a governance, I think is the need of the hour. Governance of what we have today, I think it is very damaging. Governance where they take people into confidence, revisit all the programs and policies without spending more money on them, and see whether they are really needed for the present situation. When there is lockdown and you give something in the public, people cannot even go and take, but you write in your physical report because there is something called the meetings, KDP or this or that progress meetings, and to present your findings, present your progress there before the officers. Everyone will say, write there that they have done that job. So let us not cheat ourselves. This type of a bureaucratic method, I think, should be revisited, and the academia, think tank, the people who are in the research institutions and learned people from various walks of life, I think they all have to deeply think and see that we pull out particularly the people who are socially excluded in another sense of the term, not from caste or gendered issues like the LGBTQ or disabled people, and those weaker sections were already there. But now there is a new group being formed, a mixture of everyone who was not even backward, who is even a forward community person or a developed person, but with COVID, person has come to join these newly excluded groups of people. So I think that type of a thinking is needed. And I think I will end here. Most of my points I have made, and once again, I thank the authorities for giving me this wonderful opportunity. Philomena's College is not new to me. I was in also Mysore. I think Dr. Soumya missed that out. My 10 years of teaching experience, some part of that was also in the Department of Sociology in Mysore University. And I'm proud to say that your Professor Raffel was my student once upon a time, my good friend and student, and he has really done great things to the department there. So I'm very happy for being with you. And these are very stray thoughts. I'm not personally very happy about what I've spoken, but these are just my stray thoughts. And thanks for bearing with me. Thank you very much.
Thank you for addressing us on how the pandemic has affected the vulnerable section in the society and the role of political interest groups and different associations. Thank you, madam, for your valuable input. If there is any question, clarification, please text in the chat box. And one question we have, madam, from one of our students, like what are the steps taken by Grama Sabha or the government to overcome the problems of socially excluded groups, especially during the pandemic situation? So that is the question what we have in the chat box.
Is it during the in the Gram Sabha? Is it?
Yeah, Gram Sabha or government to overcome. Yeah, Gram Sabha to overcome with the situation, especially to the excluded groups. Yes.
No, I'll read that myself, or you can read it again for me, please.
Yes, ma'am. The steps taken by the Grama Sabha to overcome the problems of socially excluded groups, especially during this pandemic situation.
No, as far as basically my knowledge is only the media, because I have not gone to any villages. And from the media, of course, as every one of you would have witnessed, provisions were given in the form of some food ration, and I think some programs were implemented which had to be implemented in that sense of the term. And in the health centers, I think the frontline workers, as they say, the ASHA workers, accredited social health activists, who are very young women with a paltry sum as their incentive, and they have to work with some 18 to 20 types of responsibilities, like from AIDS prevention to family planning, big range. And I think they have done wonderful work of helping the pregnant women, hospitalizing those who are affected, and such type of. I think they have really, and the Anganwadi worker, of course. The local SHGs, I have no whom I expected that they may be chipping in some way. I think there is no data, but there has been whatever the country, but Gram Panchayat as such, unfortunately, I don't think it has been able to do anything beyond just having its meetings, that too in maybe ZP, not even Gram Panchayats. The Jilla Panchayats, they would have had some virtual meetings, which are mandatory, and everything was, inactive. There was, the government could not pass any new things because it was shut down almost. That is my reaction.
One more question in the chat box. What do you think is a solution for the instigation of fear in the minds of minorities of the country in the present scenario?
Instigation of fear in what way? Because the minorities have been, living under some fear or the other, right from the pre-independence period. But is it relating to COVID?
It is relating to the COVID situation.
There is no such direct instigation of the minorities, because if at all the person who has asked has in his or her mind the ban on beef, for example, beef eating, or some such type of restrictions which may be laid down, I think that has been going on. I feel nothing, in respect to COVID in any special way. On the contrary, I think they tried to take some special account of protecting the minorities, and sometimes I could see the dilemma that they didn't practice it, but they were saying it mainly for political reasons. But for many things they were blamed, as I told you in my lecture itself. Without being sensitive to some of the cultural aspects, people were targeted by sayings like, why should they come out, and they were being beaten. So these reports of journalistic reports without proper inspection, I think normally in research we don't admit unless we prove that. So that forbids me from, asserting that that was true. But there has been some such investigation which has been going on.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the explanation.
No, these are all very complex terms. I think Professor Indra will agree with me. Social exclusion. It is such a big word. Anybody, even Sudha Murthy is socially excluded in one way or the other. She may be the wife of Infosys head, but that is a relative term. And we have so many terminologies these days for this reason only. We have been creating. Dr. Manmohan Singh created so many terms in the 10th plan, 12th plan period. But the problems of the people are increasing in such a way that terminologies are, we are falling short of these terminologies. But with specific reference to, as I have mentioned, to women, to some sections of the society in terms of caste, class, and religion. Region also sometimes. Region also.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, madam. And with this, we are going to conclude our today's session. I invite Rama, second year BS student, to give the vote of thanks. Good evening, all. Respected dignitaries, management and staff of the college, HODs, and my fellow friends. As we come to the end of the first day of our webinar, I extend my heartfelt gratitude to Professor R. Indra, our keynote speaker, for enriching us with her impeccable knowledge and views on COVID-19 impacts and responses. Thank you, ma'am, for your words of wisdom. To be aware and enlightened about poverty and social exclusion during COVID times is a pressing priority. Thank you, Dr. Gayatri Devi, for imparting your knowledge. To the rector, vice rector, principal, vice principal, campus administrator, IQAC coordinator, director, in their absence, HODs and staff of sociology, psychology, criminology and forensic science, and other teachers. Thank you for your presence and support. Thank you, fellow friends, for being such good audience. Wishing you all a good evening. Thank you. Thank you, madam. Madam?
Yeah, Namuga, thank you.
Yeah. So thank you, and
Thank you, madam.
Thank you all. Thank you all participants. I can see Dr. Shanti's name now. Thank you, Shanti, for joining.
okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank
Bye.
you. I benefited so much from the keynote. Thank you.
No.